All right, seeing as this weekend is Canadian Thanksgiving and I just came home with a couple 100 pounds of elk from New Mexico, I thought I would mix it up a little bit and do some elk roasts instead of the traditional turkey for Thanksgiving. When I was going over my different options, because I've got a ton of elk, I could have done a really nice cut. And I'm gonna be honest, I just prefer cooking subprime cuts of meat. I find it a little more challenging and I find the meat a lot more flavorful. I love backstrap steaks. But the bottom line is they're not that interesting. And I find shanks and chuck roasts and neck roasts that have a lot of sinew and connective tissue just a lot more fun and challenging to cook. And personally, I find they're a better way to expose people to wild game who haven't eaten a lot of wild game before. And I think it's just a more fun and enjoyable piece of meat to eat. So with all that being said, I've selected 2 neck roasts from my bull elk, and I'm going to be using sous vide as my primary cooking method. So let me take a moment and talk about what makes a good cut for sous vide and what doesn't. In my opinion, I think subprime cuts lend themselves better to the sous vide cooking method than prime cuts. Think of it like this. The proteins and the connective bonds in the prime cuts of meat are already weakened to a certain degree. That's why they're tender. That's why it falls apart and it has that buttery texture to it. And in my experience, when you use a really slow cooking method with those already tender pieces of meat, they tend to just get mushy and mealy. Now again, that's just my opinion. I'm sure there are people who can do phenomenal things with prime cuts and steaks with the sous vide. I just prefer to focus my time and energy with the sous vide on subprime cuts. Because again, like I said earlier, I think they're just a more fun and challenging piece of meat to cook, and I think it's more flavorful. So the neck roast in particular has a lot of connective tissue that needs to render out over a long period of time to become more palatable. Hence the sous vide method. Now, I'm gonna keep things really simple. I get a little frustrated when people cook wild game and then they cover it in like a beef gravy. Like, are you eating elk or are you eating beef? So I'm gonna do this in a really basic method. My ultimate goal is just to highlight the natural flavors of the elk. It's not to overpower the natural flavors of the elk. So real simple preparation method. First, I'm going to pre-sear the roasts just in a little salt and a little pepper in a very hot pan with some grapeseed oil. Both grapeseed oil and avocado oil are ideal for searing meat because they have a much higher smoke point than olive oil. So you can get your pan a lot hotter before you blow out your whole kitchen with smoke. Once I'm done searing, I'm gonna drop some garlic cloves and thyme and rosemary into the pan. And I'm just gonna let the heat of the pan toast the herbs and the garlic slightly. Then I'm gonna place each roast individually in a vacuum bag. I'm gonna load it with the toasted garlic and herbs. I'm gonna put that on at about, say 130, 135 degrees Fahrenheit, around 58 degrees centigrade, for somewhere between 18 and 24 hours. I haven't quite decided exactly how long I'm gonna cook it for yet. Then when I'm done, I'm actually gonna finish it in the oven. So we're gonna kind of give it a flash roast at 475 for 15 minutes. And before I do that flash roast, what I'm actually gonna do is put a herb crust around the roasts and then flash roast it so we get that nice kind of crunchy exterior that's really flavorful, and it will permeate down into the rest of the meat. So again, keeping things simple and basic, using elements that are gonna highlight the natural flavors of the meat and not elements that are gonna overpower the natural flavor of the meat and hide the beautiful flavor and texture that's already there within this elk.